Also ich habe 1997 einen schweren Autounfall gehabt.
One evening in 1997, I was involved in a very bad car accident after meeting with friends. It happened while I was sitting in the back seat as the driver merged onto a highway without seeing another car coming at us from the left side. This car smashed directly into us, causing an extremely ugly accident for everyone involved. We ended up rolling our car into the ditch and I remained stuck inside. I got unconscious as the emergency personnel arrived, but then I started to experience a very shrill and uncomfortable ringing in my ears. And even though I was trying to somehow protect myself from it, there was nothing I could do to get it to stop. Then, in the exact same moment that the ringing stopped, I suddenly realized I was outside of my unconscious body, viewing it from above. I was later told that I was in cardiac arrest for several minutes and had needed to be resuscitated. Another thing I learned later after the event was that this ringing is a typical symptom when the soul body separates from the physical body. I didn't have any fear at all, and I retained complete awareness throughout the entire experience. I kept floating higher above and watched as the paramedics put my lifeless body into the ambulance. I didn't have any concerns about the body. Instead, I kept noticing how a light was filling up the foreground of my vision. This light became more intense and brilliant, and it was utterly fascinating for me. It consumed my entire attention now, and a deep pleasure was growing within me. The situation still was in no way frightening or disturbing, but rather was familiar and comforting. It was also clear to me that I was now pure consciousness and could exist without my physical body. I am no longer identified as being just a body. I did have a body, but now what I am is consciousness and awareness. This was completely clear to me in that moment. But before the light had become even stronger and brighter, I had been re-experiencing moments from my previous life. They were mostly situations where I hadn't gotten closure and where I had wronged others. The revisiting of these situations made me realize that they were things I still needed to deal with and that I couldn't simply leave them behind as they were. It's become clear to me since this experience that there is no absolute death in the conventional sense of the word. There is only the transition from an embodied to a disembodied state. When we die, we leave the body behind and we receive clarity on what is most important in life. After this life review was finished, something came which is most often described as a tunnel, but I experienced it as everything around me fading out, while the light permeated more and more into the center. The light was growing, and it was brilliant and extremely bright. And despite it being searingly bright, it still wasn't blinding or painful. It wasn't uncomfortable in the least. On the contrary, I was experiencing enormous harmony and peace. I think the only thing I can call it would be the glory of being. There was no fear. Instead, I simply yearned to move deeper into the light. It was all very familiar, and I was essentially returning to the place from which I had ultimately come. I surrendered myself with complete trust to the light and felt a desire to remain there in simple existence. There was nothing negative. I felt interconnected and reconciled with everything, with absolutely no trace of conflict. I still have to this day a deep longing to return to this state. It was the most ideal world a person could possibly wish for. There is no separation from anything in this space, only connection to everything, and it is magnificent. Next, I came to an area which I perceived as a type of waiting room. There were other beings there which were in situations similar to mine. It was then clear to me that in this state I continued to retain an energetic connection to my physical body. I felt that I did not transcend completely into the afterlife, and that this waiting room was a type of intermediary stage, a transition space between two worlds. Also, I had communication with my higher spiritual being, which I understood to be my higher self, as if a part of me had always been there, inhabiting this other world. This spiritual being, or my higher self, knew everything about me and had a purely benevolent, supportive and confident attitude towards me. I could also perceive this spiritual being in a clear form, similar to a human body. We communicated telepathically, and I was told that if I were to continue into the light, the energetic connection to my body would dissolve, thus my physical body would cease to exist, and that a return to my earthly life would not be possible. I could then see that I still had things to resolve in my life on earth, and that there were tasks which I had chosen myself prior to this incarnation. There was no doubt that I needed to return to my body. It was never a command from anywhere outside of myself. It was my decision and my decision alone. The communication with the spiritual being was like a benevolent consultation. It was made clear to me that if I were to turn away from my current earthly form, that my unresolved issues would persist without me and that I would still need to face them at a later moment in a new incarnation. I was able to remain serene in that moment and to accept this knowledge with no emotional reaction. This decision to return to my body then caused my focus on the light to suddenly decrease, and I felt a type of grief knowing I would now have to give up this unbelievable state of bliss. I was simultaneously very thankful, though, that the accident had resulted in this opportunity for a glimpse into the world from which we humans have come. This experience gave me the realization that life is not meaningless, but rather that it contains concrete fields for learning and tasks to be experienced and completed. I was then suddenly back in my body, but felt a very strong desire to be back within that enormous harmony, in the bliss and in the glory of being. I tried to refuse physically waking up and kept closing my eyes so that I could feel my way back to that wonderful state. I couldn't just wake up and leave this happening behind me because I was still heavily focused on this other world and actually wanted back over. Aside from all my bodily injuries, it was also very psychologically challenging to once again accept this physical world. I even avoided relatives when they would come to visit me, but they helped me to regain footing in my physical life and to arrive here once again. They brought, for example, pictures of my children to my bedside, which showed me what meaning my life had for my family. I wanted to share this experience with others, but couldn't even come close at first. For a time, I was only able to say that I had experienced something absolutely wonderful, but that I couldn't describe it because it doesn't exist in our world. I couldn't decide what it was, but I knew for sure that it had nothing to do with dreaming, because it was much more real when compared to our world. Only after I had spent a lot of time studying intensively this subject, I slowly developed the ability to describe what I had experienced back then. And I have still always felt that I'd rather be there than here.